Greetings and welcome to a special contentious issues feature on my channel. I am your presenter, Dr. Paul Karitsis, and today I will be dissecting and critically examining the survival hypothesis. That is, whether there is any reason for us to believe that the mind, consciousness, soul, self, spirit, self as context, call it what you will, that non-physical part of us that is indivisible and experienced as fixed, consistent, and immutable through time, can survive clinical death and dissolution of the physical body. Another philosophical conundrum which extends back to the dawn of civilization. Charity Ann Ross, a special guest, will be joining me for this compelling and very thought-provoking feature. Okay, greetings and welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Paul Karitsis, and today we'll be continuing the discussion on reincarnation. So I have a two-part series. I had already posted the first part, and now we have a second part. So I just wanted to give a brief introduction on reincarnation. So we know that reincarnation and reincarnation type experiences and past life memories are a class or group of what we would call extraordinary phenomena that don't really conform to materialistic assumptions of reality. So as a general rule of thumb, they are not within the purview, I suppose, or scope of modern day empiricism, and many scientists usually scoff at the idea of reincarnation being possible. So in their eyes, the death of the brain means cessation of conscious awareness and the individual personality that it comes replete with. But let me also point out to you that materialism, or at least the materialism that parades as science today, is only what, say, about 300 years old, and began to emerge out of the revolutionary period known as the Age of Enlightenment. So reincarnation is kind of more of metaphysical doctrine that has existed for thousands of years. Pythagoras of Samos believed that reincarnation, which the Greeks called metempsychosis, and basically the soul's pilgrimage from soma to soma. And then so too, I suppose, did the mystery religions of Orpheus and Demeter with their greater and lesser mysteries. So looking back at the annals of world history, it's obvious that the belief is cross-cultural, right? And kind of was infused in the ancient Egyptian, the Hindu, the Greek, the American Indian religion, as well as other folkloristic traditions around the globe. So having said that, let's segue into this next part. So I have a special guest with me today, and I will allow her to introduce herself right now. Greetings.
Hello, my
Hi.
name is Chante Waste Winnen, and that is my Native American given name, which means a woman with a good heart. And my birth name is Charity. That's who I am.
All right. Well, welcome to the channel, Charity Ann. Yep.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, and I also wanted to point out that, the reasons why Charity is here with us today is because she has ample experience around the topic of reincarnation, right? And around reincarnation type experiences. Anyway, let's move on. So the topic of reincarnation, as we know, and life after death in general, appears to be very controversial, right, for a lot of people, as we know. So why do you think that so many people struggle with the idea of successive incarnations?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with fear and religion. Um, you know, there was like not a study, but like they took from percentages from all over the country, and they came to a conclusion that 12 to 44% of people believe in reincarnation, depending on the country. The United States, only 22% of the United States believe in reincarnation. So that's a good indicator that you know, we were built on a Christian, you know, platform with religion dividing us. So I think that has a lot to do with it, is, you know, the religion. Thankfully, my people were here back then, and we're still here now, and we still have those beliefs to pass down. So it's important to talk about, you know, why they're there, instead of, you know, they're just being a heaven or hell, or, you know, whatever.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is the fact that, you know, like in this country and in every other kind of Western country, people are conditioned, right? So we enter a period of conditioning as we raised. So we have certain religions that are imposed on us, and some religions don't incorporate that doctrine of reincarnation. However, we have a lot of claims, you know, specifically coming from children, of past life memories, and many of these children are growing within that specific tradition, the Christian tradition, right? So they're having that, you know, they're having that specific religion imposed on them, right? So they're growing within the confines of that religion. However, they're still remembering past lives, right? If you want to call it that, right? So, which is interesting, right? So it points to the fact that there's probably something veridical, something truthful, something objective about that experience, right? We have a kind of like a story which is imposed on us, or a specific religion, or a set of ideas, a class of ideas which imposed on us. But on the other hand, we're having a specific experience which is incompatible with that religious worldview, right? What does that say about reincarnation?
Right? Well, yeah, I mean, they all tie together: past lives, reincarnation. You know, when you were talking about, you know, the children having these memories, you know, I was just reading about, you know, like scientists were like just baffled by it,
Mm-hmm.
that they actually like went back to whatever, you know, this child, you know, had said, but with a past life memory, and like dug up gravestones, because they just they knew like how strongly that child, you know, knew about this, that they went to these gravestones, and they, you know, they dug them up, and, you know, would find exactly, you know, what the child was saying, you know, about, I don't know, one had something to do with like a birthmark, and, you know, leading someone to where someone had died, and them finding, like, it was crazy. So, I mean, you know, scientifically, it's just like, oh my gosh, like, we can't find the science behind it, so therefore it does not exist. And
yes, and it's difficult to attribute many of these reincarnation type experiences to suggestion or something, you know, or cryptomnesia, right? Which is something that the child may have seen, you know, on TV or through some other media outlet, and then regurgitated in the form of a story. Because a lot of the times the children themselves haven't been exposed to these forms of these media, you know, this media before, or this stream of media. And a lot of the times the story remains fairly consistent. And the type of information that they're recalling seems to be fairly cohesive and fairly specific. And as you said, when certain investigators kind of follow up later on, right, whoever they may be, the more serious investigators that are interested in these types of phenomena, they sometimes do find that what the child is saying is completely compatible and conforms with, you know, the existence of a prior personality. Do you know what I mean? Like the veridical existence of a prior personality or someone that's lived before. So that's phenomenal. It's extraordinary in many ways, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's also sad because they also think, they may deem that that child is having some type of mental illness, or like
Yeah.
that they're crazy, or that, and that's really sad. Like my son, he's 15 now, and when he was 5 and 6, I remember very vividly him telling me things, that he saw, and he swore that he saw them, but they weren't there. But they were things that I know for a fact that he's remembering, from a past life, things that he knows almost as if they're going to happen. I'm not saying he's psychic, but just I think that Native American side of him is in him, where he has felt those things also. So
Yeah. It's pretty interesting how a lot of the times these memories will exist early, right? And then they tend to fade as the individual enters their current life, right? Because, this information kind of gets weeded out, or it's forgotten. It's quickly forgotten. It's superseded by the experiences of the present personality and what's happening in the child's life now. And there's only so much, so much room that we have, or, storage that we have in the brain, right? So,
yeah,
the brain needs to let go of certain things. And if it's going to let go of something, it's going to be like memories of a past life, right? Which it doesn't
yeah,
need to form a reincarnation.
right,
Um,
yeah, because he doesn't have that. I mean, anymore. He doesn't. He still has like very vivid dreams that he tells me about, but the reincarnation thing, and he gets deja vu all the time, and it really freaks him out. So
yeah.
and yeah, so
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay, let's transition onto another point. So, as we know, and as you've said, you have an Indigenous background. Uh, would you be able to tell me a little bit about how reincarnation and past lives, or the idea of past lives, fits in with that worldview?
yeah, definitely. I come from the Yankton Sioux tribe, which is the Nahangtawa Oyate, which means Dakota Sioux, and um, we are from South Dakota. And I think it's probably important to point out that I grew up with my father, who's white or Caucasian. So I grew up in a very strict Christian home, and my mom left when I was very young and went back to our reservation. So I grew up in that westernized world. So for me, learning about my culture and the type of ceremonies we do and healings was something that I wanted to do my own soul searching for when I was in like my 20s. Um, I don't know why, but it just came about. Maybe because I just knew in the back of my head that it was knocking, and it was time for me to start looking into it. So um, I don't have all the answers. I'm not an elder. I'm not someone who grew up listening to the stories, but I do have my close family in South Dakota who um, I speak like with my mom. I speak to her, my aunts, and they they talk to me about these things, and um, it's not coincidence, because there are no coincidences, that the things that I started to believe in and started to practice um, were exactly that of what they had told me that they do in our culture.
Right.
Um, the Sioux tribe is they're known as being deeply rooted in star knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So being deeply rooted in star knowledge isn't just about, like astronomy and astrology. It's also about, the star knowledge is such a broad spectrum, but it also involves past lives and, dreams and, um, uh, what do you call it? Because I remember I was having them, and you're like, oh, those are awakened.
Are you talking about precognitive dreams, predictive dreams?
Well, yeah, well, I have those, but the awakened.
Lucid,
It was. we've talked about so much in like a decade, like it. Yeah, but they were.
yeah,
I was having them like not in a dream state, but
yeah,
in an awakened state.
yeah,
So, um, we do believe that when we die, um, well, we don't believe that there is death. We believe that there's only a change of worlds.
right.
So, when it comes to reincarnation, a lot of people think that like you're going to come back like as a cat or a dog or a wolf or, stuff like that. But what what we believe and what is, I don't know, deemed to seem more, a little more like not so far-fetched is
Yeah,
that when we talk about reincarnation, we're talking about where we go from on, like, after this life,
yes,
and where we reincarnate and what life we reincarnate to
right.
after, the soul leaves the body,
Mm-hmm.
and where our soul, is meant to go. And that, that's up to the higher power, where they, feel, we're ready to go to this place or that, whatever's out there. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much out there. But, a lot of people believe in just like this life. And,
Right. Yes,
you
that's
know,
exactly right. And in the Native American tradition, uh, is there kind of a karmic residue which is connected with your current incarnation? You're in the process of resolving karmic debts or something to that effect?
yeah, that goes really deep into, say, I'll just make it easy. Say you look up your birth chart.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, Astrology has become so westernized.
Mm-hmm.
And the way the Native Americans do it is much more detailed. And
Right.
I mean, it tells you some crazy stuff like that you would just not believe, but you have to know where to look um, in your birth chart. But so what was your question? I got off topic.
No, it's okay. We sometimes digress, and there's no issue. There's no issue there. I was just talking about we're talking about the idea of reincarnation, from the perspective of the Native American
Oh, okay.
tradition, and
Okay.
also whether it's tied to karmic debts or karmic residue. So basically, is that a fundamental belief of Native Americans?
Yeah, like, okay, that's where I was going with the birth chart thing.
Yeah.
When you dig deep enough and know where to dig in your birth chart,
Mm-hmm.
there's actually a specific placement, or whatever you want to call it, where it actually tells you what your karma,
Mm-hmm.
what it's in, what sign it's in,
Mm-hmm.
and what you're supposed to be doing in this life, to fix it, to be able to go on to the next life and not have to repeat you know, going back, you know,
Right.
digressing to, you know, like, and having to relearn, you know, what you were supposed to be fixing in this
Right.
life.
Right.
So
That's completely fascinating how, you know, your trials and your tribulations, the trials and tribulations, uh, the issues that are going to come up in one life or in one incarnation are already woven into your natal chart, right? So it's almost like here's the natal chart. It's almost like a map, right,
mm-hmm.
of the
Yep.
different terrains and contours and ebbs and flows that your life's going to take, right, or most likely going to take,
Yeah,
which is fascinating. So,
my
yeah.
friend who is an astrologer, he's also Native American. The first time I ever talked to him, he told me that our birth chart is our soul's DNA.
That's interesting.
And I had never heard that before. And I was just like, wow, like that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like that.
A lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah. Our
So,
soul's DNA. Yeah,
you
it's
know, but
nice.
people, yeah, but you know, it's just become so westernized, and just people like, oh, I read my horoscope today, I'm gonna, you know, like meet someone and fall
Yeah,
in love. Like, no, you're not. Sorry. No,
yeah,
you're not. That's not gonna happen today. So, um, you know, but yeah, so
yeah. The horoscopes are very specific usually, right? They're very
those,
fixed.
I think I was
That's
supposed to get married like 20 times by now,
yeah, right.
according to the westernized
Yeah,
horoscopes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very funny to read a horoscope that way, and then sometimes you'll read it and you'll be like, "When's this going to happen?" It says that it's going to happen within the next week or the next few days, and sometimes you go actively seeking it, right? So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when you put yourself in certain situations where that scenario is likely to eventuate, and then you're like, "Oh, you see, like the horoscope was right, right?"
Yeah.
And it's like maybe it might be more connect, or the more parsimonious, the more likely explanation is that you went out seeking it, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, I never
yeah,
thought about it that
that makes
way. Yeah.
sense. Like
Yeah.
you can interpret it that way too,
Yeah.
um, or maybe it's both, right?
I mean,
Maybe
yeah.
it's both explanations. We don't have to
Well,
go an either or.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, one thing people don't realize is that, you know, we have met ourselves before,
Mhm.
that we're not from here. And, you know, we have met ourselves before. And I think everybody has that feeling.
Yeah,
But they ignore it,
yeah,
or they put it off as something else, and they don't just sit, you know, and listen in silence to the fact that, hey, I already know me. Because you do, because you know, you have lived other lives before, which is why, you know, you have deja vu, which is why this person seems familiar to you, you know, like it's all interconnected, like you said with the whole web thing. Like,
yeah,
you know, nobody, not just one person, you know, weaves the web of life. We're all, you know, weaving it together. We're all interconnected. So that's one big thing people, you know, they just don't want to understand, or they don't.
they don't want to
Yeah.
understand. Yeah, yeah. They conceive it, they perceive themselves as being completely separate to the rest of the universe or the rest of the world, right? We try and see ourselves as these singularities that are kind of walking around, but really we're all fundamentally interconnected with one another, right?
Very.
The fundamental harmony of the universe, right? We're all kind of one, almost like we're different cells in the same body, right? There's this union, and we have a common ancestor, right? So we can think about it biologically and spiritually or psycho-spiritually in whatever way you want. It all comes back to one, right? We are all, the all is one. The one thing that I wanted to ask you was, your own personal past life memories or experiences, which led you to believe that there is a life after death, right? So a lot of people come to that conclusion through personal experience. Something, maybe they've had their own past life experiences or past life memories. Other people come to it through reading. So basically they'll read and they'll learn about reincarnation and how ancient that specific idea or doctrine is. And they'll feel it to be intuitively true for them. Or it'll ring more true than, say, something that being conditioned into, like the Christian religion or whichever other, another monotheistic religion or whatever. Would you be able to talk a little bit about your personal experiences with past life?
Of course. I mean, I could go on for weeks about this, but because I have had some crazy, things happen, and I don't want to say that it's all, has to do with because I'm Native American, like it could just be that, I was just born with, with that in me. But a lot of it does connect with my Native American culture. So it's kind of hard to tell. And I don't try to, identify myself as a human being or attach myself to, those things. I just think of them as, okay, well, that's just who I am. It's not, I'm not going to try to seek out and be like, oh, is this because I'm Native American? I have to find out, but probably so. But so with the reincarnation, yeah. So I have, and you probably remember this.
Yes.
I remember texting you and telling you, I'm like, Paul.
Yeah.
I have to tell you what's been going on because I'm getting a little freaked out. And I kept having what at first, like, it didn't feel like deja vu.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know what it was. That's why I started getting really confused.
Mm-hmm.
And I told you how just out of like nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
I still do have just this memory.
Yes.
But I remember that memory. So almost like I'm remembering a dream. But if you have deja vu is like that. It's like gone in a second.
Yes.
And then you can't even remember, or you don't even have that feeling anymore of what you just had deja vu about. It's completely gone.
Yes.
But this wasn't that. It was me remembering these things, but they were sticking with me, and they were very vivid. Mm-hmm. Storylines or things that happened, and then that's when you told me I was having awakened past life memories. That's what it was. That's what you said.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you told me about Seti. And
yes, that's right. Yes, that's a very famous example, right? There's been a few books that have been written about her, and I think the whole deal with her was that she fell down the stairs when she was young, and they had pronounced her dead, but then when the doctor walked in, she was apparently up, and from that moment on, something happened. I don't know, like there was some kind of, it scrambled her brains in a way that, allowed her to access these past life memories that she had as an Egyptian priestess of, she was a priestess of the goddess Isis, I believe. And she had a love affair with Seti, King Seti. Anyway, but the interesting thing about her was that she knew things that she couldn't have possibly have known, like particularly when she told archaeologists that if you dig here, you'll find this, or if you dig here, you'll find this. She seemed to know things that she shouldn't have known. So a lot of people question where that information actually came from. Did she obtain this through, non-physical means, extraordinary means, right? So outside of the 5 physical senses, right? Something super normal or paraphysical or supernatural going on. so it's a very interesting story. Hers is completely fascinating because it's a very compelling case, at least in my eyes. You know, a lot of people don't see it that way, right? They try and find other explanations to account for it. But
No, I resonated with her
yeah, yeah.
immensely.
Because you read it, right? You read the yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I was just like, holy crap, like I don't remember falling or anything, but
yeah, yeah.
I'm having these awakened, you know, like past life memories, and now they make sense to me. And I think because I started to realize what they were, they sort of kind of started fading.
Mhm.
And if they faded into me being able to tell what other like people in my life, like what they were in a past life. And when I would say that, they'd be like, oh my gosh, I've always pictured myself like, you know, being a gladiator back in the times, or being, this or that. And it's just weird, and as for me, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I have so much more so of the intuition,
Yes,
that my head gets, things mixed up a lot, but the intuition part is really strong.
yes.
And like what you were just saying, like how Amseti would know things that you
Mm.
just should know. That's how my intuition works. Because in people, like, I like freak my friends out, or freak people out, like, because I'll just know something,
Mhm.
and they'll be like, how did you know that? Like,
Yeah,
oh, and
and
I'm just like, I don't know. I don't
yeah,
know. I just did.
it just comes through, and you know, in many cases, the information or this extra sensory information seems to filter through in altered states of consciousness. For some reason, when we're disidentified from ourselves, right, from our conscious lives, it increases the chance of that information filtering through. That's why most people receive this information during dream states, right? Or, they're more lucid, or they're more receptive to this information when they're in that state of consciousness. And I think Omsteady herself used to have her encounters with SETI during, you know, either periods where she was asleep, or periods where she was in a hypnagogic or a hypnopompic state, hypnagogic going into sleep, or hypnopompic coming out of sleep, right? So that is a very fascinating phenomenon, to think about it
Yeah.
from that perspective. Yeah, yeah. So um, did you want to add anything else to? I mean, one thing that I want, yeah, one thing that you also mentioned intuition, and that's kind of interesting because when I was young, um, certain things would happen to me, or I would become, it almost felt like, why am I gravitating towards this, or why am I drawn towards this, or why am I expressing this particular capacity, or this like for something, and you don't know what to attribute it to. Like, for instance, when I was young, I had a very profound fascination with palm trees, um, right? I think I may have referenced this before, but I was fascinated by the African palm tree. And, I used to travel out to one of my uncles or aunties in Coburg in Melbourne, and there was a line or a series of palm trees, right? Kind of like in the middle of the road, kind of like in the, where there's an island separating one side of the road from the other. There were these African palm trees that used to grow, and I used to see them, and would just revel in kind of how awesome they looked and how majestic they were. And I didn't know where this profound awe and this feeling of experiencing something sublime was coming from. And I'm like, it's almost like I'm remembering something, but I don't know what I'm actually remembering. And then, as I got older, I'm like, okay, African palm trees, I'm like, they originate in Egypt. I'm like, maybe there's some kind of connection with Egypt. And then I went through a period where I was drawing the number 9 on the walls of my house. And I was fascinated by the number 9, and I have no idea why. I would draw it and repetitively draw it over and over, onto, colored bits of paper or whatever. And the teacher would always look at it and think, what's wrong with this kid? Do you know what I mean? Why does he keep, drawing the number 9? And the number 9 is apparently, a very magical number, right? It's an important number in the universe, apparently. Like one of the things about 9 is that, say if you times 9 by 1, it equals 9, right? And then if you add it, so 9 times 1 equals 9, 9 plus 1 equals 9, right? So 9 times 2 will equal 18. But if you add 9 and 2, hang on. Am I right? Hang on.
You said 9 plus 1 equals 9.
9, yeah. Well, hang on. 9 plus 1 equals 10. Sorry. You're probably... Yeah.
I'm like, hold on. I'm like, did I not learn something?
No. Yeah. Yeah. So no, that's actually funny. No, there's a pattern with the number 9. So 9, is it 9 times 1 equals 9? Oh God, what is it? There's a specific pattern, and then when you add the two numbers together, oh, I know. So 9 times 1 is 9. So 9 times 2 is 18. Add the two integers of 18 together, and it gives you 9. So 1 plus 8 equals 9. So it's an interesting pattern. Then 9 times 3 is 27, right? Add 2 and 7 together, what does it give you?
9.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? Like the pattern, like you add the two integers together, and then it always gives you 9. So I find that completely fascinating, and apparently many ancient cultures considered 9 to be a magical number or a very significant number in creation, right? It has creational significance, and mathematics is the language of the universe, isn't it? Right? So yeah, absolutely. The golden ratio. Right?
Yeah, I'm terrible with math, but
all these laws and properties. But yeah, that's completely fascinating. Like that whole 9 times 1 equals 9, and that's 9. You don't have to add it to anything because it's just one integer. 9 times 2 is 18. 1 plus 8 equals 9, right? So you add the two integers of the final product together. 9 times 3, you've got 27. 7 and 2 is 9, right? And so forth. It's just, yeah, right? And then no other number does that, operates like that. It's pretty, anyway.
I've actually never read anything about that. That's kind of weird.
But yeah, I can't remember where I read it. It was a long time ago, right? So I have a bit of a scrappy memory when it comes to it, but I remember it. I'm like, there's this significance to the number 9. And then as a child, drawing and redrawing the number 9, I'm like, why was I fascinated with that number and not with 8, right? Or with 2, or with 3, or with 7, for instance.
Yeah.
It's just something to think about.
Yeah.
So
the only thing I was going to add about with the Native American culture, and when it comes to dreams, particularly dreams, Native Americans recognized the power of dreams like way before Sigmund Freud. Don't get me wrong though, Sigmund Freud is one of my favorites, but the Native Americans recognized the power of dreams long before he did. Before he developed his theories of the unconscious, and I guess, like, with that said, the Native Americans actually dealt with the feelings of like the urges revealed in dreams, and by using techniques that's really similar to psychoanalysis,
right.
And by talking to therapists, but that back then it'd be like shamans and stuff, and dreams always represented or symbolized, something, unfulfilled desires and
Right.
representations of fears, and all that actually can restrict us and damage our health, which, I actually just read in a book that I just bought, which is weird. But we're so unaware of, I guess, what we would call dream analysis, and when it was such an essential part of the Native American healing processes or healing
Right.
ceremonies.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, absolutely. I think he was one of the first people that acknowledged the cathartic value of dreams
yeah,
and that dreams had a specific purpose, right?
and they do, and some people believe that dreams mean nothing.
Yeah, just psychological, or kind of like a way that your brain just unloads at night. Do you know what I mean? Kind of just declutters. Let's just use that word. It's kind of like part of a decluttering process.
Yeah,
But Freud, you know, was very interesting. I mean, he published his interpretation of dreams and then brought dreams back into the intellectual or academic limelight, Um, so gave some credence to dreams as being something more than, just psychological garbage or like, process of decluttering. There was a deeper meaning to them
yeah,
that was associated with unconscious processes being rendered conscious, right? And in that transition was where a lot of the healing actually occurred, right? Was to make the unconscious conscious. It's pretty interesting. He had a very reductive view of dreams, though. He focused a lot on sexual symbols and images, right?
hmm
Whereas, his student, like Carl Jung, um, saw them, in a much more sophisticated and comprehensive way, right? So he had a very different, he introduced the idea of psychological archetypes, right?
yeah.
And the theory of the collective unconscious, right? The group mind. Um, so, but yeah, um, very interesting, very interesting discussion. Okay, so uh, this is going to be, we're going to segue onto something else now. So as we know that there's many forms of knowing, right? So one of them is intuition. The other one is knowing through passing, a repository of knowledge along from one generation to another, right? There's empiricism, right? So there's scientific thinking and analysis. Um, do you base your beliefs on reincarnation and past lives? Do you base that on intuition, right? Rather than anything that you've read or anything that you've gleaned, I suppose, from the intelligentsia or from academia?
I base everything off my intuition,
Mm,
which I believe everyone should do.
yeah,
Um, Nothing against scientists, or scientific evidence, which, the term scientific based evidence in the native culture, we call it faith based knowledge.
huh,
Um, because these are things that we have known, you know, since the beginning of time. And, scientists are just now, will come out and say, oh, like this, smudging will help you clear energy, stuff like that. And it's just funny to us because to us, it's faith based,
yeah.
but so, everything is just intuition to me.
Yes,
Everything.
and one thing that I recall very vividly when you talk about that is that, the many years ago when I did the experiment, the time experiment on precognitive dreams, right, where I uh, decided to take Dunn's methodology and use it again, right? And
Yeah.
then, and conduct an experiment around precognitive dreams. And I think one thing that you turned around and told me was that, why do you need to validate it empirically, right? Through observation and measurement,
Right.
when you know
Right.
intuitively that it's real, right? Or that it's
Yeah.
true, right? Um,
Like, what are you trying to prove? I did
exactly.
get mad about that, didn't
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think you kind of, yeah, you peaked you a little bit. Do you remember? You're like, why do you want? And I think one thing that you spoke to me about, which I recall vividly, was when I wanted to, I mean, when you had some precognitive dreams that you wanted to offer, but then you needed to check with an elder if it was appropriate for you
Right.
to disclose the information. And I wasn't aware that, the realm of dreams was considered so sacred or sacrosanct to the Native American tradition and the religion. You know what I mean? So it seems to be information which is very private, right? It's not really disclosed openly. Am I right?
Right. Right. Yeah, because, you know, dreams for us, you know, we're told things in dreams, we're showed things in dreams. And sometimes like I don't understand why, like, because it'd be something really small, like in the dream study where like my friend was in my dream, and like I told her to get a certain instrument,
Yes.
and and I text her the next day and told her, oh, I had a dream about you last night and you were buying like some type of keyboard, and she was, and here her friends had just bought her this keyboard because she was looking for a new instrument. And
It was.
so it's just like, what was the point of that? Like, not that I'm doubting my ancestors, like, forgive me, I'm not doubting my
Yeah,
ancestors, but
yeah,
it's just maybe it's just like a little like knock on the head, like, hey, you need to pay more attention type thing.
yes, yes.
But yeah,
Gently
they're
pointing your attention to it, right?
yes.
Drawing your attention to it.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because that one was actually in the book.
Yeah.
The one that you're
Hmm.
describing now was actually in the book.
Yeah.
But that one was a fascinating one. And then there was one around your mother as
Hmm.
well, having,
Yeah.
or maybe not breaking her leg, having fallen.
Yeah, she had fallen, and she had no way of getting up. Her phone wasn't near her.
That's right. Yeah, I remember it now. Yeah,
I can hardly remember the story. Something about crows.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's in it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It was the second one. It was the second dream that you
yeah.
offered. Yeah. So yeah, it's completely fascinating. Um, yeah, so it's interesting how we try to. Um, there's this need to try to validate something or legitimize a specific phenomenon through the lens of contemporary science, or a permutation of science, you know which is very reductive, I suppose, and materialistic, and espouses materialistic assumptions about reality. And that can be really hard to do, because how do you use a science whose scientific tools, or whose tools are predicated on that materialism, to legitimize a phenomenon which is essentially non-physical in nature, right?
Well,
um
scientists, they're when they come to a conclusion about something, it's not a knowing. It's
right.
still a guess.
That's, essentially,
So,
yeah, the findings, I mean, you never present findings in any absolute context, right? You never say this is the way that it is. This suggests, rather, right?
yeah,
Or it points to this
yes, that's
being
why
a
have
likely explanation. Yeah.
that's why I have such a disdain for
Yeah.
science.
Yeah,
Like,
and as we know, it changes through time, right? The science of today will not be the science of tomorrow, which will not be the science of 1,000 years time, which will exist. I think Tesla said something to the effect of, when science starts to examine non-physical phenomena, is when it will experience or some augmented growth, or something like that. I can't remember the exact quote, but he said something like that. And we are coming into an age where these non-physical phenomena, as when past life you know, memories and experiences, OBEs, NDEs, right? So near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, you know, doubling of consciousness, all those sorts of things, precognition, precognitive dreams, right, which is part of precognition, telepathy, all right, telekinesis or psychokinesis, if you want. All these phenomena are now being studied, you know. So who knows where we'll be in 100 or 200 years' time, right? So there'll be an exponential growth in science, I think, you know, especially when it comes to non-material or, you know, non-physical phenomena. So one other thing that I wanted to ask you about was, so in your professional, or rather in your personal opinion, why do you believe we reincarnate?
It's everything for me is a feeling. I never thought about that type of stuff, about reincarnation, until I was in my like mid late 20s. And it had a lot to do with, I started listening to, I went through a really hard breakup with my son's father. Started listening to or finding like musical artists who were talking about these things that I thought that I was like the only person who had ever felt that way or had ever had that, you know, like an experience like that. Or so the more and more I listened and more bands I found made me realize that, you know, that there was always that part of me, but it was just when it was going to, you know, come out. Music had a huge influence on that. Just to shout out, Soja was a huge eye-opening for me. I mean, just yeah. So anyways, and what else? I didn't, you know, I didn't have the urge to like study it or seek it out.
Yeah.
You know, but if I came across articles about it, if they weren't like stupid articles, you know, just like where people are just like taking guesses and stuff, I would read them and be like, okay, well, yeah, like that makes sense. But the more I learned more from the people I met, like the astrology guy who's my friend, who's old, he's much older, he's like almost 80, but he's also Native American, you know, who just opened my eyes and about stuff about reincarnation and just certain, you know, terms without using the word reincarnation, talking about like soul's DNA. And then it's like that saying that the Native Americans saying that there is no death, there's only a change of worlds. Like then that started to really, you know, process in my mind, like, okay, I get what, you know, what they're talking about. But, you know, like I said, I go off everything. I go off of, you know, my people want to call it their gut feeling, which is your intuition. It's the same thing. So I've always followed that, and it's so important to follow your intuition about everything, because it's never going to misguide you in any way whatsoever. But I guess the one thing, I mean, do you want me to go into like the biggest thing that changed my life?
Yes. Yeah, something which was a life-changing event for you. Absolutely.
Yes.
Shifted your perspective in life, or, you know, was the source of some kind of existential crisis, or, do you know what I mean? Just precipitated an
Yeah.
internal shift or change of the way that you see things or the way that you view the world and
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah. It had me very, in a very, um my spirituality went away for a while after everything happened because I was so confused. But so um, a guy that I was, his name's Tony.
Mm-hmm.
He and I were going to get married. He was from Boston, and we had met on my website, which is Alternative Astrology. You guys want to check that out. But we met on there and then ended up becoming just within, hours. We just felt like we knew each other instantaneously. And long story short, um, he came here and he lived with my son and I for a while. And we decided that we were going to spend our lives together because we knew from the second that we had met, we knew that we were, but from, now I call twin flames because twin flames are aren't actually supposed to like meet.
Mm-hmm.
um like everyone has one, but if you are one of the lucky ones who does meet your twin flame, there's always something that's going to um hold you back from being with them,
Right.
in some way.
Right.
So unfortunately, in my way, was devastating. But um, so he decided while he was here, he was going to go back to Boston. He was going to work for 2 weeks and save up a whole bunch of money. He has my dad's permission to be a part of my son's life and my life, and marry me when he got back. And my dad said absolutely. And I didn't even know that until well, I'll tell you when. So and he was going back to work, save up money and get the rest of his stuff because he had brought most of his stuff here. And so he went back to Boston, and during those 2 weeks before he was supposed to come back, he was just acting strange, and he was just tried committing suicide once. And he said the only thing that pulled him out of it was thinking about coming back to where I live and being with me and my son. That's the only thing that made him not do it. So anyway, so I hadn't spoken to him. It was about like, it had been like 2 days, which was very, very unusual for us because we, talked every day. And all of a sudden, I'm like blowing up his phone, nothing, and messaging him and just nothing. And all of a sudden I got a phone call, and it was his grandmother. And she was like, "Is Tony with you?" And I said, "No." I was like, "Where is he?" And she was like, "I don't know." She's like, "Last I heard, he told me that he was getting a train ticket, to come and see you guys and go back there." And she's like, "I was just wondering if, he was there because I haven't been able to get a hold of him." And I just knew right then, it was not going to end well. So Tony ended up missing for exactly 30 days. During those 30 days, I had encountered so many things that people, if I told you, you wouldn't believe. It's just because it was just crazy things. But
Right.
signs that he was with me. And he was, in hindsight, like he was trying to tell me that for me not to worry. But at the time, I just really didn't think anything of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think you mentioned, I remember when this was going down, the little synchronicities that were going on and certain
yeah,
things maybe moving around in your room or something
because
like
that was, yeah,
that. Yeah,
his stone,
that's right.
I took him to like this hippie store, and he was like really attracted to this, I think it was an onyx stone, and uh, he had had it downstairs in our home. And while he was missing, I was vacuuming my room, and I didn't have like a bed frame. My mattress was just like on the ground.
Right.
Um, and I never once like had like vacuumed under my mattress.
Right.
And I don't know why that day I just, I don't know, like just happened to like, because it was a king size mattress, like it was huge. It's a
Mm.
California king, that's what it was. But
Yeah.
but I lifted it up and I started like vacuuming under it, and I'm like, what's that? And I picked it up, and it was his rock,
Right.
his stone. And I'm like, there's no possible way that that could have gotten there.
Mhm.
So I put it on my dresser, and inside like this little thing I had. And I think it was like a day or two later, I was cleaning the living room, and I was dusting the TV stand, and his stone was behind the TV stand.
Yeah.
And I'm like, am I losing my mind? I'm like,
Yeah.
because sometimes I do things, but,
Yeah.
and I ran upstairs to my room, and, just to like double check, like maybe there's two of them,
Yeah.
but it wasn't there. And I asked my son if he had touched it. He's like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But it kept moving, and it was just, and that wasn't even like the weirdest thing. Like like one of the things that just still to this day I think about every night was while he was missing. um I got into bed, and I had just shut my eyes, and granted I wasn't tired, I was just you know closing my eyes and trying to fall asleep. And all of a sudden I heard a man's voice call my name.
Yes.
But it's weird. It sounded like it was right next to me, but at the same time it sounded so distant. I don't know if that how that makes sense. But and I popped up, and I'm like looking around my room, and I'm like, what the heck was that? Well, it was him.
Yeah.
And you know just so many things. So there's so many things
Yeah.
that happened. And
There were a lot of anomalous phenomena that seemed fairly non-random, right? You were like, what's going on here and how could this, it just seemed like this isn't making sense, right? Um,
yeah.
yeah, it's yeah, I remember all of those events that were occurring, one after the other. And I think you also described, I remember during the time that this was happening, um, seeing, I don't know, like a projected image of him or his avatar somewhere near the lake.
Oh, yep, that was okay. So he was missing for 30 days.
Yes.
Um, on that 30th day, uh, his his grandmother had called me,
Mm.
and we were just talking, and she casually mentioned that they had found a body at the local library that was
Right.
right by there. And she's like, but it's not Tony. She was like, the person they found was like an old man, because he was, like he was like not overweight, but he was like bigger
Yeah.
and had wrinkly skin, like it wasn't Tony.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, I'm like, well, that's good. Like, I had been thinking this whole time, that he was getting help for his PTSD. and had just went somewhere because we had talked about that and that he was getting help. And, so I never thought about the fact that, he may have committed suicide. So that evening I had gone to the beach and I went to the sunset, and I ended up at like this place where it was very desolate, and had like the perfect like beach wood to sit on, and just like a beautiful place. And I was just crying and saying my prayers
Yeah.
about him being safe. And I just it was just weird when I think about it, the way that I felt, because at the moment it felt normal. But now I look back at it, like if someone had seen me, they probably thought I was crazy. I got up to leave, and for some reason I just started pacing, like in the same spot, back and forth, back and forth. And then I stopped, and in the water they have these huge rocks, boulder rocks,
Right.
and which obviously helps the water from coming up too far. But there's, as the peninsula goes down, there's tons of them. So I stopped, and I just felt like that. I felt like I was, like something was protecting me.
Mm-hmm.
And with that feeling, it it was almost like it turned my body physically, like for me, like I didn't do it myself. I felt like out of myself, kind of. So I turned and I look out in the water, and on the rocks there was Tony, just
Right.
right on the rocks. And he was sitting there, and he had this smile on him that I will never forget, because it was a smile that just it was just this smile that gave me this comfort. uh you know he was saying goodbye to me.
Yes.
I didn't know that at the moment, but I could see what he was wearing. But he was also like translucent almost, because it's not like a normal person sitting out there on the rocks. It didn't look like
Right.
that. Like, and it wasn't blurry, but it was just like, I don't know, transparent or something. But I could still see what he was wearing,
Right.
and
So
that
it wasn't
smile.
completely opaque, right?
No,
So okay, where you could,
no.
where it's like a gross like physical body. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah, no. There was like a what like there was some type of aura around him, because I could see it. So maybe it was the aura that made him look, like that way. But
yeah,
I could still see. But that look on his face and the smile,
yeah,
it's just, even to this day, it's just so comforting to think about it. And it didn't faze me, when it happened, and it happened so quick.
mm,
And I just, and then it was gone. And then I remember I started walking, and a couple of times I kept turning around because I like thought I would see him again. But um so I didn't even really think about it. Like on
right,
my drive home, I don't know, almost like I wasn't fazed by it. But so I got home, and not even 10 minutes after I got home, uh I my cell phone was ringing, and it was Tony's grandma.
mm,
And I answered it, and she said, "Charity, honey," she said, "I'm sorry." And my heart just dropped, and she said it was his body. And she's like, "Do you have someone you can be with right now?"
yeah,
And I just dropped to my knees, and I hung up the phone,
mm,
called my dad. My dad couldn't even understand a word I was saying, but he he knew, he was there within 5 minutes.
yeah,
And I just fell into my dad's arms. And it was just like I don't know, you know, it's so hard to think about still, like, during the time he was missing, why, you know, he did certain things. Or like when I was laying on the couch one night, I literally felt like he was behind me holding me.
Mm.
And, you know, little things like that. And then I realized, you know, he couldn't say goodbye until they found his body and people knew that he was, you know, that he was
Yeah.
dead.
It's interesting also the temporal contiguity of, you know, for instance, you seeing his aura near the lake, and then also the fact that right after, right in the, you know, immediately afterwards, you were alerted by his grandmother that he had passed away. So it's almost like, you know, some kind of supernormal projection on his part, which would comfort you in a specific way. Do you know what I mean? Like it'd be something to offer comfort, um, or at least help you during that time of great loss and mourning. You know, during, you know, I think throughout that period there may have been a part of you that was aware that he wasn't around, right? But even then, you hold on to that hope that maybe, do you know what I mean? Like he's just somewhere and he'll appear. But usually, the longer time goes and they haven't shown, the less likely it is that they're going to show up, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's just, that's when I was 100% without a doubt,
yeah,
until this day, changed my life, that I know for a fact that there is not just life after death, but there is a place that we go that allows us to be able to carry the essence of love with us, and lets us say goodbye to our loved ones. And, you know, that doesn't mean I know that Tony reincarnated or anything,
yeah,
but the fact that he was able to do that while he was missing, and the fact that he was able to come to me like he knew I was about to find out that
yes,
that
yeah,
you know, they had found his body, and I was about to find out that he committed suicide.
yes,
And so, I mean, it's just really one of those things that, you know, you can't contemplate for, like, you know, because it's just like a miracle that you have to accept. And um but just the fact that, you know, he knew when to say goodbye to me. You know, he was with me the whole time.
yeah. It's very uncanny, like those two events, how they came right after the other, right? The
Yeah.
projection,
And
and then
yeah.
immediately the news that came afterwards on behalf
Yeah.
of grandmother.
Yeah. And I mean, that just, at first I was very spiritually lost,
Hmm.
because at the time I had, you know, I wasn't very in tune with my spirituality. And um it just made me think, like, so much about life after death, and like, has everything I've ever thought, like, you know, not been true? And, you know, what am I supposed to believe from this? And um but if you ever watched the movie Interstellar, uh that movie was what actually connected me and Tony. And um that's about, you know, past lives, and that after we die, the only thing that lives on is the essence of our love.
Right.
And to me, that's like our soul. And um, we we'd always, you know, talk about, you know, that movie and just the crazy things in that movie, and he, you know, opened my eyes to like the interpretation of it, and it was almost as if what he was, you know, telling me, and you know what that movie meant, and even in certain parts of the movie, it's almost like it played out when he died. It played out the same way,
Yeah.
you know. So that was a huge thing between us. And you know, he would still visit me in dreams after he died. um and it's it was always a really good feeling, you know, to see his face and to see him smiling and stuff in my dream. And I never ever once tried to, you know, figure out why I dreamt about him or what the meaning was
Mhm.
of, you know, the dream. All that mattered to me was that, you know, he was able to connect to me through my, you know, my dream sleep state.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was
Dreaming.
able, yeah, he was able to visit me through that. And he's also has visited my son, like in many ways, whether it be him being able just to feel him having a dream about him, or him hearing him say something or tell him something, you know, in his head. um or little, you know, or signs, like little signs. um so, you know, if we're able to reach out after we die, how can someone, how can someone deny the fact that love, our love doesn't, you know, exist after we die?
Right. Yeah.
No, because,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, being
Absolutely.
able being able to reach, you know, someone like that is just, it's still mind boggling, you know. So it still makes me fear a lot, but I do know that, um you know, there is greater things, you know,
Yes. Yeah.
go
And
on.
many of these, I think, posthumous communications, right? Afterlife communications, can be a source of closure as well, particularly for the individuals that are left behind that are still living, right? And I think the conclusion that, we can come to and we can all agree upon is that, our lived experience will frequently inform, um, and be the basis of our core beliefs about the world and about reality, right? And about the universe. Um, so more often than not, it's one person's set of beliefs pitted up against someone else's, right? Because in truth, we're all limited, right? We're all confined by the fact that we're all, neurological simulators that simulate only, partially accurate representation of reality, and no one has all the answers, right? In any objective sense. So a lot of times it's my opinion and belief versus yours. And I suppose that's where, you know, that's who we are. That's where we have to remain. So in any
Yeah,
in any case, yeah. So yeah, so it's been a great discussion with you,
yeah,
Charity. So
yeah, it's nice to talk about these things, you know, for people to hear.
yeah,
We probably should have been doing this a long time ago.
yes, absolutely. And I'm pretty sure many other people have very similar experiences to share as well,
Oh yeah. Oh
right?
yeah.
People
Yeah.
that may not be as forthcoming, because they fear ridicule or misunderstanding or judgment, or for whatever
Yeah,
reason.
well, that's why you were the only person I to this day,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, Tony died. It
How
was
long ago was it now? It was
it just
5 years.
passed 5 years.
Yeah.
Um, so, and to this day, you know, you are the only person, because I knew that you would understand.
Yeah.
you know, and that you'd be the only person who wouldn't be like, this chick is like crazy, like mentally ill,
Yeah.
crazy, like, you know. But yeah, I mean, I want to tell people, you
Yes.
know, and people who in my life who have a parent who passed away or close friend, you know, the thing I always tell them is to keep your eyes open.
Hmm.
And I don't mean that literally. I just mean, don't, you know, blow something off that you think is nothing, because most likely it's a sign,
All right.
you
Yeah.
know. So you just got to keep your eyes open, because that's something I didn't do. That's why in hindsight it's hard to think about, because in hindsight, like, it's just so 2020, and I realize now, like, why all those things happened, and why I decided to vacuum under my mattress that day, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, you really just got to keep your eyes open, because our loved ones do definitely come to say goodbye in some
Totally.
way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And
So,
a lot of times, you know, the way that we interpret something changes over time, right? So, you know, at that point in time or at that moment, you're thinking certain things, but then as time progresses, you see it in a different way. Certain other things come to light, you know, the historical trajectory of the events, and you're like, oh, this is the most likely explanation now, right? So the truth reveals itself in time. Um, and on that note, we will close. And so, yes, I would like to thank you for being a special guest star on the channel. And yep, me and you will talk soon.
yes, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. Okay. Take care.
All right, thanks for having me.
Yep. Okay. Goodbye. Bye.
Bye.